Looking overseas, delivering his keynote speech today at the annual high-level Boao Forum, Chinese President Xi Jinping urged countries to work together, saying global affairs cannot be decided by just a few nations.
Mr. Xi said there's no place for unilateralism or hegemony, adding, "The world wants justice, not hegemony." He also said, quote, "When countries get along with each other, we must put equality, mutual respect and mutual trust in the forefront."
From trade to technology, China and the US have been locked in confrontation over a range of issues. Washington has sanctioned a raft of Chinese officials for human rights abuses in Xinjiang and Hong Kong and has blacklisted a number of Chinese tech companies for what it says are threats to national security.
Let's hear more from the Straits Times' China correspondent Elizabeth Law, who joins us from the conference in Hainan. Hi, Elizabeth. So what parts of Mr. Xi's speech stood out particularly for you?
Well, a lot of his speech, a lot of people are sort of expecting him to talk about climate change, which he just gave a brief mention to. But I think what really jumped out to me at the speech this morning was the fact that he talked about, very usual themes that talked about multilateral cooperation and Belt and Road. But there were some strong words that he used as well, because he said that, some countries, when they try to impose their views on others, this is not going to go down well with the rest, and things like big countries should behave the way the countries do. Of course, he didn't mention any country by name, but everyone knows that he was referring, of course, to the US, because the US and China are still locked in trade tensions. But other than that, really, it was a speech that is pretty much like most speeches that Mr. Xi gives whenever it comes to multilateral events like today's.
Right. Elizabeth, you mentioned that Mr. Xi, he didn't address the climate change issues, even though people were expecting it. Why didn't he, though?
Well, analysts that I spoke to here and those who watch climate change very closely all believe that this is because of the climate summit that President Joe Biden has organized for later this week. So I imagine if there's any sort of climate-related announcements, they would want to keep it for later this week to make at that forum rather than at the summit here, which really is, it started as a conference that is mainly about economic issues. It was billed as China's answer to the World Economic Forum. But of course, in the last 5 years or so, it has been expanded to include things like geopolitics and trade and economy.
Right. So we know that tomorrow is the last day of the Boao Forum. Liz, what is the significance of the event actually, and what is its objective this year?
Certainly, the huge elephant in the room has been the coronavirus pandemic. People talk about a post-pandemic world, how are we going to recover from this, post-pandemic economic recovery, and of course about vaccines and whether or not the world will ever go back to the way it is. So clearly, the COVID-19 has had a very big impact on this year's edition. The last year's was cancelled because China was still grappling with the outbreak. This year, even though this has started, which is China's way of showing that they are back in business, there are a lot of the foreign dignitaries, foreign participants, and especially heads of state, including our own President Halimah Yacob. They have delivered remarks via video link rather than being here personally.
Right. Well, thank you so much for the updates, Elizabeth. That was our China correspondent, Elizabeth Law, coming to us from Hainan, where the annual Boao Forum is being held.
Right. Well, in a video message at the forum's opening plenary, Singapore President Halimah Yacob said the pandemic has given the world a common cause to band together and underscored the importance of multilateral cooperation.
The COVID-19 pandemic is a defining challenge of our time, but it will not be the last. Long-term transboundary threats remain, including climate change and terrorism. I hope that the international community will be able to learn the lesson that this pandemic has given us, that global governance is ultimately in our common interests, and come to a renewed consensus on the advancement of an open, inclusive, and rules-based multilateral system that is fit for purpose in a post-COVID-19 world.